This is a miniature version of a chart used in Rachel Costello's newest pattern, the Fall Line Cardigan, and she's also used this design element in the pullover version of the Fall Line sweater. Today I am going to walk you through each and every one of these crossing stitches on both the right side and the wrong side. The 1-1 in each of these just means that one stitch is crossing over one other, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, and sometimes there is a purl stitch involved. At the end of the video, I'll share some more tips for achieving success with this particular pattern. The video is separated into chapters, so you can go ahead and skip ahead to the part that you need right now. These crossing stitches are basically just miniature cables, and you can use a cable needle to carry the crossing stitch. Cable needles can look something like this or like this, but since these are just worked over a total of 2 stitches, it really is easier and faster to do it without the cable needle. But if you're more comfortable using that, then by all means go ahead and do that. In the pattern, all the cable stitches are noted as you see them from the right side of the work. This is because the crossing stitches always travel or cross on the right side of the work. A right cross always crosses to the right on the right side, and a left cross crosses to the left on the right side. When you are working on the wrong side, you still need to work the crosses as they're shown on the right side. For example, all of these are right crosses going to the right as you're working. From the wrong side, it actually seams backwards. Same thing with the left cross on the wrong side. It's crossing that way. You can always flip it up and look to remind yourself, since these are continuing in one direction. For a left cross on the right side of the work, you'll knit into the back loop of this second stitch on the left hand needle without slipping it off, and then into the front of the first stitch. The left cross wrong side, we'll check, make sure we're in the right spot. This one is crossing over that one, so yes, we are. We will insert the tip of the right hand needle into the back loop of the second stitch on the left hand needle. Slip both first and second stitches off. Regather that first stitch with the left hand needle, and then slip that second stitch back on. And purl both of those stitches. For a left purl cross, you'll bring the working yarn to the front and insert the tip of the right hand needle into the back loop of the second stitch on the left hand needle. So the back loop being back here as opposed to in front, because this stitch will be crossing behind. Slip them both off, slip that first stitch back onto the left hand needle, and then the second stitch. You'll purl the first one because that one crossed behind, and then knit the one that crossed over in the front. This left purl cross is worked exactly the same on the wrong side as it does on the right side, which might seem like it doesn't make any sense, but I will show you and you'll see. So you'll bring your working yarn to the front, insert the tip of your right hand needle into the back loop of the second stitch on the left hand needle, slip both the first and second stitches off that left needle, regather that first one on the left hand needle, and then slip the second one back on. And then you will purl one, and knit one. Whoops, make sure the yarn is in the back when you knit one. And you can check to make sure you've done it the right direction, and I have. For a right cross on the right side of the work, you will knit into the front loop of the second stitch on your left hand needle, keeping it in front of the other stitch without slipping it off, and then into the front loop of the first stitch. For the right cross on the wrong side of the work, with your yarn in the front, you will purl into the front loop of this second stitch on your left hand needle as normal, without slipping it off, and then purl into that first stitch and then slip both off. You may notice that that is worked exactly the same as the way a right cross is done on the right side. The only difference is that you're purling both stitches instead of knitting. For a right purl cross on the right side of the work, with the yarn in the back, you will insert the tip of the right hand needle into the front loop of the second stitch on the left hand needle from right to left, so not twisting it. Slip the first and second stitches both off of the left hand needle, and then put the first stitch on and the second stitch, changing their order. Then you will knit one, knitting the one that crossed in the front, purl the one that crossed in the back. The right purl cross is worked exactly the same on the wrong side. So you will insert the tip of your right hand needle into the front loop of the second stitch on the left hand needle. Slip both the first and second off, put the first one back on, and the second one. And you'll move your yarn to the back, knit one, and move the yarn to the front and purl one. When you're first getting started establishing these crossing stitches, one thing that can be helpful as a visual aid is to take a post-it note and place it above the row where you're currently working. Since this is such a tiny condensed chart compared to the actual pattern chart, it's probably not necessary much past about here once you get your ribbing established, because in the real sweater it continues on much longer and will become much easier to predict. Some things to note about this pattern: the sleeves have this element also, and they're worked in the round. So when you're working this type of a stitch in the round, it's no different except that there are no wrong side stitches. It's all just right side, right side, right side, right side. So it's actually easier in the round than it is in rows, because you can always see the right side of your work and you're always going in the same direction. You just have to pay attention to where your ribbing is. And once you get going with the crossing stitches, you'll get a better feel for what needs to be done and when. Just one thing to remember is that no matter what, you're always going to be knitting or purling this second stitch before the first one. It's just a matter of whether it's crossing in front of or behind. When it comes to following the written instructions of the pattern, using this chart as an example, which, remember, this is just a tiny, tiny, tiny sample of the pattern, so our rows are numbered differently on here than they will be in the actual pattern. But as an example, if we were working row 5 of this chart and we had written instructions to go along with it, they would say something like work collar in pattern to M. M stands for marker. In pattern is referring to this established 2x2 rib, which is really easy to follow once it's been established, as long as you know how to read your knits and purls. Then you will slip the marker. Just imagine I had a stitch marker here, and knit until one stitch before the first cross stitch from the previous row, which means I will knit until here, because this is one stitch before the first cross stitch from the last row. This crossing stitch needs to continue to the right on the top, so we'll knit that one first without dropping it off, because we'll still need to knit that second stitch. That was an RC that we just did. Now we will work up to the cross stitch from the previous row, paying attention of course to our established ribbing. So we will knit that one, purl these two, knit one more, and now we are up to the next cross stitch from the previous row. And we know that this is going to be an LC and not an LPC because we only have one knitting stitch here from the ribbing, and we'll need to have one more before we start the purls again. We know that this one is crossing over the front and this one is going through the back, so we'll knit that one through the back loop, keep it on there until we've done this first one again, and now we've done a left cross. And then where it says repeat star to star, as you'll notice in these written instructions to the left, there are two little asterisks. So between those two is one repeat. So now we're back to where it was saying knit until one stitch before the first cross stitch from the previous row. So I'm knitting across here, and now we are one stitch before, and just like we did before, this one's crossing in front, this one's going behind. They're both knit because we only have two purls here, and then we're going to have two more knits before we do a purl stitch. So we will knit this one in the front, hold on to it until we've finished that other one in the back of it, slip them both off. That was a right cross, and we can easily see again that we will knit one, purl these two, knit one more, and we are back to the crossing stitch from the previous row. This one will go in front, this one will be behind. They're both knitted. Then we will knit to the marker, which would have been here, and then we continue to work the collar portion in pattern in that ribbing that we've established. And before we flip it over to the wrong side, we'll take a minute to note what we'll be doing next. We've just worked this row, and as we can see, when we come to the next set of crossing stitches, this will cross that way and this one will go behind and become a purl stitch, so that we can continue that purl two, knit two, purl two pattern. So we'll keep that in mind as we flip it over to the wrong side of the work where it's much harder to see. And again, just as an example, because this is different than the actual sweater pattern, if we were working on row 6 of this chart with written instructions, it would say something like work collar in pattern to marker. So we'll follow that same ribbing, slip the marker, and then purl until one stitch before the first cross stitch from the previous row. We can flip it over and look. I see that that will be only two more for me on this one. I'll do those two, check again. Yes, we are one stitch before this first crossing stitch from the other row. And we know that we are going to be crossing it this way. So this one will stay on the right side of the work, which is behind as we're looking at it. And it will need to be purled. This one will need to be knit so that it can join in with this ribbing pattern. And we will slip this one off, because remember, it's really awkward to purl that one through the back loop without losing the other stitch. So we switch their order, make sure the yarn's in the front, Keep those two separate. Purl that one and knit that one. That was a left purl cross. Now we will work in the established ribbing pattern up to the crossed stitch from the previous row. Take a look, not there yet. Do some more. One more. Are we there yet? Yes, we are. We are up to that crossed stitch. And remember, we're doing another purl cross. In this case, this one is going to be knit because it's the next knit stitch in this ribbing pattern. It's really easy to see now because we have 2 knits and 2 purls. We are going to knit this one first through the front loop. And then we'll move the yarn to the front and purl that one. Take a look and check to make sure. Yes, that is correct. Then once again, it says to repeat star to star. So that means we are purling these stitches until one stitch before the last cross stitch. Whoops, that's too many. Okay, now we're one stitch before, and this one is crossing on that side of the work. So we will slip it. Remember, we don't want it to be twisted, so we always do this through right to left. Stick it back on. Make sure your yarn's still in the front. Purl it, and then knit that one. Yes, that is correct. Then we will continue that established ribbing in the middle there until the crossed stitch from the previous row. There we are. This one is going to be going that way. So this one we will knit it because of the ribbing. Bring the yarn to the front and purl that one. Then continue in pattern until the end of the row. TW, by the way, stands for turn work. Just like that. So now that you know all about the 1-1 crossing stitches, go get yourself Rachel's pattern and knit yourself a gorgeous sweater. The link for the pattern is in the description box down below.